Battlefield 1 is being discussed at great extent on the internet at the moment, and I've noticed of recent that there's been a lot of concerns and a lot of areas of issue that people have brought to light quite frequently. And in today's video I thought it'd be quite handy to go through these concerns and address some of these issues from my experience of playing the alpha for what I'd probably say is a far too extensive amount of time. It was one of those things, I guess, where I knew I'd play it out till I'd worn myself out and maybe not even enjoy it as much anymore because I've been playing the same map and mode over and over again. But once it was gone, it was just that feeling of holy shit, what am I going to do until the beta? And I'm still coming to terms with that, but nonetheless it's important to carry on discussing the closed alpha and the implications that it had. So like I said, we have a short list here today of things that people have brought up, and I'm going to go through them one by one and say my piece on what I think about it. So the first one is time to kill. Now, TTK has always been something that has been heavily disputed in the Battlefield community. Many would regard the Battlefield 4 TTK as the best one so far, and people prefer that kind of pacing of the game. I personally am in agreement with that. I like the Battlefield 4 TTK, however I felt towards the end of the game's life cycle it got a bit too slow due to the fact that weapons had a huge balancing shift and things kind of changed up there, but I felt overall the general consensus was across the years of Battlefield 4, TTK was well done. So some people have raised concerns that the TTK in Battlefield 1 is too fast. Now, I'm going to put this straight to bed straight away. The TTK in Battlefield 1 is the same, I'd say, as that of Battlefield 4. Now, what people need to realise is that in Battlefield 1, the weapons across the board are slower, so having a faster time to kill only makes sense if the weapons are consistently slower, which they are. So as a result, there's a really fine balance between weapons being slow enough and time to kill being fast enough to create a kind of equilibrium that's almost identical to Battlefield 4. LMGs, for example, I don't believe exceed 500 RPM in terms of fire rate, and I imagine they are one of the fastest, if not the fastest, in comparison to the SMGs in terms of broad weaponry that we can compare to Battlefield 4. So for example, the Mazda, in my opinion, probably takes around a good 4 to 5, maybe 6 shots, depending on where you hit somebody in the body, in the leg, in that kind of region to take them down. And the accuracies and inaccuracies of this weapon also have to be taken into account when adjusting for time to kill. So overall, I'd say the time to kill to Battlefield 1 has been done incredibly well. However, I do have some concerns about the snipers and the direction they are heading in, because I feel as though the time to kill on them has been done well, but if it's overdone in the final build, or if they're buffed too much, we might see a sniper powerhouse on Battlefield 1. But overall, TTK is very similar to Battlefield 4, so you can put that one to rest. The next one is it fun? Now, this is a question that I feel has been brought up quite a lot, because people are saying, well, is the Battlefield 1 closed alpha good? Are you enjoying yourself when you're playing it? And I suppose the issue is really here is that comparing the alpha to the final product of the game is quite challenging. Now, the closed alpha had a lot of hardcore players in it, people who were playing the objective, people who were working incredibly hard to get good footage and things like that, and as a result, it's arguable that the experiences in the alpha won't be the same to that of the closed and final version. With that said though, I did enjoy the Battlefield 1 closed alpha quite extensively, and I have to say, despite playing the same map and the same mode continuously over and over again, there was enough fun there for me to enjoy sitting back of an evening and collecting some footage for myself, and just overall I felt if I wanted to sit down and play a quick game of Battlefield, I could do that, and it was something that I felt, even though again it was a very bog standard one map one mode situation, the Battlefield 1 closed alpha was pretty enjoyable for me. I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about a 7.5/8, and obviously with the variation of modes, weapons, maps that are going to be coming in, I'm sure that experience is only set to improve. So yeah, overall it was a fun closed alpha, and I strongly suggest that anybody who gets their hands on the beta draws their own conclusions about the enjoyment of the game. Next up is the concern surrounding simplicity. A lot of players have said that Battlefield 1 might be too simple, and some people who have seen footage have felt the same. The HUD looks very Star Wars Battlefront-esque, it's very clean, it's very basic, and the general sort of vibe that the game gave off due to the fact that conquest had been toned down and weapons had been messed around with and planes and things like that had all been altered so rapidly, is that perhaps they're aiming towards a more casual audience, and due to that we should maybe be concerned that the game is being too simple. Now, I disagree with this to an extent. Now, although it is quite clear that they are trying to make the game more accessible, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game is being dumbed down or pointed towards some kind of simplicity that we can't enjoy. Now, I feel like a discrepancy has to be made between simplicity and accessibility. You can make a game more accessible or more simplistic, but you can also make a game have equal amounts of depth. Battlefield 1 is a game that is slightly more on the simplistic side of things in comparison to previous Battlefield titles, but not as much. The only real change I'd say is the odd tweak to gameplay dynamics here and there, and of course the changes to Conquest. But the thing is, at the same sense, we're getting a lot more accessibility, and the game just feels a lot more open to new players who are going to be enjoying the experience of the game. And as long as the depth is there, there is no reason why simplicity can't be a good thing. Now, as long as the game has lots of depth in terms of playstyles, in terms of dynamics, in terms of how you want to run your weapons, what vehicles you want to use and what attachments those have, and as long as the general game depth is there in terms of content, then there's no reason for you to be concerned about simplicity. I, for one, felt that this wasn't really that different to Battlefield 4 except for the odd sort of change here and there in the game modes, which is very obvious, but I felt that the skill margin to an extent had actually improved to some degree, because I felt as though after a good while, and once I'd gotten to grips with things, I was massively outperforming some other players on the field, and that sounds very pretentious. And Lachlan, why are you bragging, you motherfucker? But that's how it was for me, and I felt like once I got to grips with the sniper rifle, the Lee Enfield carbine version, I was absolutely destroying players out there. So I feel as though simplicity isn't really a major concern for me, but we'll have to look out towards what the final product looks like. Next up is destructibility. The big question, is it Battlefield Bad Company 2? The big answer, pretty much. I'd say it's like 95% there. Now, in Battlefield Bad Company you can pretty much level everything. In Battlefield 1 you can't level certain things here and there, but the overall consensus is that the battlefield can turn from a well-populated village to a holy fuck, this is just mud quite quickly. But it does it in a way which isn't too destructive to the sense that the overall flow of gameplay is directly impacted upon. So yeah, destructibility, big thumbs up, don't be bothered or concerned about that, because it is what you'd anticipate from a Battlefield title of the Battlefield Bad Company 2 variety. Next up is historical accuracy. And lots of people will be like, whoa, Battlefield 1, man, why are there automatic weapons, why is there this is futuristic, this is inaccurate. Sure, it is, and there's no denying that, but at the same sense, this isn't a simulator, and this isn't a historically accurate game. Battlefield has never had a history of being historically accurate. Most of the weapons in Battlefield 4 even are like prototypes that have never actually seen the light of day. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as the game is enjoyable and the take that they have on World War I is a good experience, then I'm in agreement that perhaps historical accuracy isn't something that we need to be concerned about. In my personal opinion, I think that a game that would be a lot more slow-paced and trench warfare based entirely and had a couple of discrepancies here and there, so essentially we would be left with, I think, a couple of bolt action rifles and maybe the odd semi-automatic one here and there. But the game would just be ridiculously slow. It probably wouldn't be as fun as Battlefield 1 is right now, and I feel like gamers just have to appreciate that. We're making some trade-offs here and there, but at the same token, the Battlefield 1 take that has been made on World War 1 is one that I feel is a success. I'd say it's enjoyable, and I'd say it's something that you guys can look forward to. Next up is a really strange concern, and this has to link in with historical accuracy as well to an extent, and lots of people have just been talking about the race of characters in the game. Like, people have been going on about, well, why is there a black guy for the Germans, and there's an Indian guy? There seems to be quite a few of those, considering it was a few British troops that were actually Indian. And I'm just here like, why is this a concern? I understand that people like to respect history, they like to acknowledge the fact that there were many troops of multiple different backgrounds who all deserve credit for their partaking into World War I. But at the same token, we can't just go ahead and say, oh, there's a black guy for the Germans. Fuck that, that's wrong. No. Like, it's, for me, as much as I understand people trying to justify their againstness of this in terms of historical accuracy and being historically respectful, at the same token, if you're politicizing a game, then why are you playing it? the reason for video games is to get away from shit like that. Like, I consider myself to be incredibly politically active. It's something that I take quite seriously, you know. I focus on my politics, I focus on, you know, current events and current affairs, and I'm relatively vocal about it. But at the same token, I play games, so I don't have to care about stuff like that for a couple hours of the day. And as far as I'm concerned, the people who have raised concerns about this feel, to me, as far as I'm concerned, it just seems like they're trying to defend some kind of aura of, you can't be too politically correct, how dare you, blah blah blah. Like, dude, who gives a shit? I don't give a shit. I've never felt personally offended that the person on the front cover of Battlefield 1 isn't white. I am white myself. I am very much. I have ancestors and people who in my past, my family history, fought in World War I, who were white, English, and Irish, and I'm just here like, I don't care. I'm sure. I don't mind, and I'm pretty sure the same principle applies to people who are from like African American backgrounds, people who are from African English backgrounds, people who are from all kinds of different backgrounds, Indian backgrounds, Asian backgrounds, loads of different backgrounds, even the Australians, goddammit. Like, I don't think they ever sit there, look at the front cover of a game, and go, well, I'm really offended. I don't think I've ever seen a black guy complain, oh, I'm really offended that there isn't a black guy on this front cover. It would be like me complaining that the front cover of FIFA is Messi and he's an Argentinian and a foreigner. And that isn't historically accurate because football has always been predominantly white. It just doesn't make sense. So don't really bother with it. And if you're really that concerned about something like that in a video game, then as far as I'm aware, you're probably not getting the enjoyment out of a video game that you probably should be getting. And maybe it's something that you can just shift aside in terms of ideals and opinions, because at the end of the day, you're shooting people. Have fun, enjoy yourself. Next up is the HUD. Now the HUD is something that has been, I don't know, something that's been very controversial, and of course this does have to link in with 3D spotting. And in my opinion at the moment, the HUD is a kind of, how can I describe it? It's really challenging. It's really challenging to try and describe the situation with the HUD, because although I would be criticizing it, I don't have a solution either. Now the HUD to me at the moment seems very intrusive. It breaks the immersion here and there, specifically in terms of the fuck off big icons that appear in front of people's heads whenever you spot them, and some of the capture points and things like that. It's all very in your face, and you know, you're trying to enjoy the scenery and it bothers you. But at the same token, I really don't have a way where I can say, well, this is how you fix this, because, you know, if they gave me a couple of HUDs, I'd probably say, yeah, sure, I enjoy that one. But at the same token, like, they've got to get the information on the screen. You've got to be able to see the objectives. You've got to be able to see how many bullets you have in a mag. Or maybe you don't need to if you're that badass. But, like, the overall majority of players like it that way. So it's quite challenging to make such a huge design change. And as far as I'm aware, like, the HUD is invasive and I think it can be improved, but at the same token, I'm not going to sit here and entirely slander the HUD when I have no ideas or fuck all clue how to improve it myself. That's something for the guys who get paid to design these things for, and I really do hope they can make the immersion a bit more there for you, and I think they can make the HUD less intrusive, so hopefully we can see some improvements in that aspect. Next up is balancing. Now, balancing is an absolute sheg. It really is. And I do feel sorry for the guys who have to sit in front of a desk trying to work out the maths of how the fuck everything's going to go down. Because quite frankly, I tried making a balancing video and I felt like it was pretty good. And there's a link somewhere in the description or on screen, because I'll probably say this, but give it the actual publication of this video and it'll be fuck all to see. You will not see that link, but hopefully it's there if I remembered. And essentially, to me, balancing was really strange, because moving from PC to console and back and forth and, you know, seeing the differences between the two platforms was really shocking to see, because there was a huge discrepancy between how the two different platforms play. And a big example of this is that semi-automatic rifles are actually really good on PC, in my opinion, because you can bang lots of headshots. But on console, they're all over the place and they feel like absolute shit. So, you know, it's something that's just like, whoa, how do I how do we deal with this, you know? And again, this is one of those situations much like the HUD, where I can offer some suggestions, but overall I don't really have a conclusive constructive criticism that has a solution. The constructive criticism really is that I feel as though balancing has been done okay, but the big problem is right now is that when certain classes are lacking in firepower, other classes seem overpowered or seem as though they are just more overbearing on the entire title. A good example of this is that because semi-automatics are relatively shit on console, LMGs and sniper rifles are definitely much more favorable weapons because they have that kind of similar range depth to it, and they can get the good amounts of power out of the gun, and that's just something that you don't really achieve with the semi-autos right now. So I feel like they need to be very careful with the balancing. I feel as though it can be improved. I did see, I think on console specifically, far too many LMGs running about the place, but one thing I do want to say is that I don't think they should nerf snipers. I've seen this come up quite a bit, but in my opinion it's nice to have snipers that are actually freaking good for once, because they've been awful in pretty much most Battlefield titles prior to this. So hopefully if the semi-automatics are improved to an extent, the snipers will feel a bit more toned down, but as far as I'm concerned, everything is okay-ish, and there can be some adjustments here and there to balancing. So finally, the big one is overall experience. How did I feel about the closed alpha? Now, for me, obviously being a closed alpha, there are certain things I could judge where I was like, oh, that's awful, how dare you? But there was never a big glaring issue. I never felt that there was a huge issue in my face that was so problematic that it couldn't be fixed over one quick meeting at DICE. Like balancing, for example, and the HUD, and things like destructibility. These are all things that seem to be relatively quick fixes, and things that we have seen improved in patches in Battlefield 4. Maybe not destructibility, but the rest of them for sure, and destructibility is already pretty ace. But things like HUDs and balancings and things that, you know, could be potential problems are all relatively fixable. There was no glaring performance problems, there was no huge glitches that I faced, bearing in mind there are quite a few because it was alpha, but I didn't face one where I was like, that's a game ender right there. But yeah, it was just a really positive experience, and I'm really hopeful for where Battlefield 1's heading at the moment, because it seems like a really good direction to be in. It seems like they're trying to find the balance between accessibility, depth, and simplicity, which they're starting to get towards, and I can see how they're doing that. They're making the game more accessible, but trying to provide more tactical depth, and you can see that from the map design, and you can see that from the changes to modes, and that looks really good. And at the same token, you can see that they're working on balancing. They're trying to accommodate this historical area to a degree of historical accuracy, whilst at the same time making it enjoyable. And they're finding their feet on that kind of field too, but I feel like they've done it well initially. So lots to look forward to, in my opinion. So guys, that's about it for today's video. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you think that this is something you could listen to more of, due to this fabulously British voice, I don't really know, but apparently that's an appeal of the channel. You tell me, to be honest. Make sure you leave a subscribe, you know, I've got lots of stuff coming up for Battlefield 1, Titanfall 2, and Rising Storm Vietnam. Need I not forget Squad, because that's a fucking great game too. As always, fellas, if you enjoyed this, leave a like, leave a subscribe, thank you for watching, and it's been a privilege to make this video, because YouTube is fun and stuff. So, here's this snazzy new outro, because I've been promising people I'd do an outro, so yeah, have a look at that.